The sun hung low over Willow Creek, Ohio in the summer of 1955, casting a golden haze over the smokestacks of the Willow Creek steel mill. The air hummed with the clatter of machinery and the chatter of workers, their boots kicking up dust on the gravel paths that crisscrossed the town. This was where life revolved around the mill, a sprawling beast of iron and steam that employed nearly every non-disabled soul in the county. In those post-war years, America was rebuilding, and towns like ours thrived on the promise of steel, but also on the sacrifices of those who toiled for it. Every month, the mill rewarded us with benefits: 3 crisp dollar bills, a bundle of cotton, and a precious yard of fabric earned through sweat-soaked shifts and rationed labor points. These weren't just rewards. They were lifelines in a world where a single yard of fabric could mean a warm jacket for winter or a new dress for church. I'm Emily Thompson, a senior engineer at the mill, one of the few women who'd climbed the ranks in a man's world. My husband David was a truck driver for the mill, a man whose easy charm and broad shoulders made him a favorite among the workers. His job was to haul steel across state lines, and his confidence behind the wheel of a Mack truck was the talk of the town. We'd been married for a decade, and I'd left my small hometown of Dayton to build a life with him here, dazzled by his strength and the promise of a shared future. But that summer, as I stood in our cramped kitchen, sorting through our latest benefits, I felt the weight of a different kind of labor that went unseen. Without so much as a glance my way, David had decided to give his share of the benefits to Sarah Miller, the young widow who lived next door. Sarah was a striking woman with auburn hair and a delicate way about her that turned heads. She'd lost her husband in the war, leaving her to raise 2 children, Tommy and Lily, in a modest clapboard house just across the picket fence. "It's only right to help," David said, tossing his dollar bills and fabric onto the table as if they were scraps. "Sarah's got those kids to feed, and she's got a knack for sewing. She'll make better use of it than we would." His words stung like a slap. The mill's benefits weren't handouts. They were earned through grueling hours. I'd spent the past week pulling double shifts, calibrating machinery under the flicker of fluorescent lights, my hands stained with grease and my back aching. I'd planned to use my fabric to sew a warm jacket for our son Noah, who grew faster than our budget could keep up with. I'd also sketched out patterns for knee pads for David's parents, Helen and George, whose arthritis flared up in the cold Ohio winters. I'd dreamed up a cushioned backrest for David for his long drives. Not a single stitch was meant for me. Yet here he was, dismissing my efforts, comparing my clumsy hands to Sarah's deft needlework. "David," I said, my voice tight as I gripped the cotton bundle. "These benefits are mine too. I worked overtime for them. Don't I get a say?" He shrugged, his blue eyes flicking away. "Don't make a fuss, Emily. People will talk. Sarah's alone and she's got no one else. Besides, you're not exactly a seamstress. You could ruin the fabric." The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in with the weight of his words. In Willow Creek, gossip was currency, and I could already hear the whispers at the mill's lunch counter: "Emily's too selfish to help a widow. Can't even sew a straight line." The thought of those judging eyes made my stomach twist, but what hurt more was David's casual dismissal. He didn't see the hours I'd poured into the mill, the nights I'd stayed late to fix a broken conveyor belt, the dreams I'd tucked away to keep our family warm and fed. To him, I was just Emily, clumsy, unworthy of nice things. Sarah, on the other hand, was the town's darling. At 30, she was younger than me, her hands nimble enough to turn scraps into quilts that won ribbons at the county fair. The neighbors adored her, constantly dropping by with casseroles or offering to watch her kids. I didn't begrudge her their kindness. She was a widow, and Willow Creek prided itself on looking out for its own. But David's choice to give away what we'd both earned felt like a betrayal, not just of me, but of the life we'd built together. I stood there staring at the fabric on the table, its soft blue weave a reminder of my unacknowledged labor. As I wrestled with my anger, I thought of the stories we tell in Willow Creek, tales of resilience of families pulling through hard times. They're the stories we share at the diner over coffee and pie, or on the mill's break room radio. And if this story of mine resonates with you, you'll want to share it too. Hit that like button if you've ever felt unseen. Leave a comment with your own tale of standing up for yourself, and subscribe to this channel for more stories of folks like us finding their way in towns like Willow Creek. Your support keeps these stories alive, just like the mill humming in this town. But back to that summer day, I felt a spark of defiance as I stood in my kitchen. I'd spent years bending to David's whims, to the town's expectations, but something was shifting inside me. The fabric on the table wasn't just cloth, it was a symbol of my worth, and I wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. The kitchen clock ticked loudly each second, a reminder of the hours I'd spent at the Willow Creek steel mill, my hands steady on the machinery, my mind sharp despite the exhaustion. It was late July 1955, and the mill was the heartbeat of our town, its furnaces roaring day and night to churn out steel for America's bridges, cars, and skyscrapers. Every worker earned labor points tallied like gold in a ration book, which we traded for necessities, food tickets, fabric cotton. My points, hard won through overtime, were meant to keep my family warm, give Noah a jacket that wouldn't fray by spring, and ease Helen and George's aches with padded knee supports. I'd even planned a backrest for David to soothe the strain of his long hauls. But as I stood over the kitchen table, the blue fabric now claimed by David for Sarah, I felt the weight of my unseen labor pressing down. "Emily, don't be unreasonable," David said, leaning against the counter, his voice carrying that easy confidence that had once drawn me to him. "Sarah's kids need clothes more than we do. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." Helen, my mother-in-law, nodded from her chair by the window, her knitting needles clicking. "Sarah's got a gift with a needle. You'd botch it, Emily. Let her have the fabric. It's the Christian thing to do." Puffing on his pipe, George added, "The mill's benefits are for the community, not just one family. Sarah's got no man to provide for her. Think of her kids." Their words were a chorus, each note dismissing the nights I'd spent recalibrating the mill's rollers, the burns on my fingers from hot steel, the sleep I'd sacrificed to earn those labor points. I'd worked an extra week of overtime 16-hour days that left me dizzy to secure that yard of fabric. My 8-year-old son Noah needed a jacket for the brutal Ohio winters. Helen and George, with their creaking joints, deserved comfort, and David, always on the road, needed support for his aching back. Yet none of them saw my labor, only Sarah's need, delicate hands, and tragic story. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles whitening. "I earned this, David, every stitch of it. I was going to make Noah a jacket, your parents' knee pads, and you a backrest." Why is it always me who has to give David's eyes narrowed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his handsome face? "Don't start, Emily. You're not Sarah. She can turn scraps into something beautiful. You'd waste it. Besides, the neighbors are watching. You want them gossiping about how selfish you are." The mention of gossip hit hard. Willow Creek was a small town, its streets lined with tidy bungalows and prying eyes. At the mill, the lunchroom buzzed with chatter, who was hoarding ration tickets, who wasn't pulling their weight. I could already imagine the women at the diner sipping coffee and whispering, "Emily Thompson, too stingy to help a widow. Can't even sew a seam." The thought made my chest tighten, but David's comparison to Sarah cut deepest. To him, I was clumsy, unworthy of the fabric I'd earned, while Sarah was a saint, her needlework a miracle. I thought back to the early days of our marriage, when I'd left Dayton for Willow Creek, starry-eyed and full of hope. David had been a catch-a driver who could handle a truck like an extension of himself, respected by even the mill's senior engineers. His confidence had swept me off my feet, and I'd poured everything into building a life with him. But over the years, that confidence had turned into dismissal. He never saw me as enough, no matter what I did, fixing a jammed press at the mill, stretching our ration tickets to feed the family. With her poised smile and perfect stitches, Sarah was the standard I could never meet. As I stood there, the kitchen felt smaller, the air thick with the scent of Helen's knitting wool and George's pipe smoke. Noah ran in from the backyard, his cheeks flushed from playing with Sarah's kids. "Mom, can we give Sarah our fabric? She's making Tommy a shirt." His innocence twisted the knife. My son, swayed by Sarah's charm, saw her as the hero, not me. I swallowed hard, forcing back the tears that threatened to spill. "Noah, that fabric is for your jacket." "I worked hard for it," he pouted, his brown eyes clouding with confusion like David's. "But Sarah said she'd make me something too." Helen clucked her tongue. "See, Emily? Even Noah understands. Be a good mother and think of others." The weight of their expectations pressed harder, but something inside me stirred a spark of anger, of refusal. I'd spent years bending to their demands, giving up my rations, time, and dreams to keep this family together. The mill's labor points weren't just numbers, they were my hours, sweat, and pride. And yet here I was, being told I was selfish for wanting to keep what I'd earned. The injustice of it burned a fire I hadn't felt in years. I looked at David, his arms crossed, waiting for me to cave like always. But this time, I didn't. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "This fabric is mine. I decide what happens to it." The room fell silent, the clocks ticking, suddenly deafening. David's jaw tightened. Helen's needles paused and George's pipe froze mid-puff. Noah looked between us, his small face caught in the tension. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the first crack in the life I'd built. A crack that would soon split wide open, leading me to a future I'd never dared imagine. The kitchen in our Willow Creek bungalow felt like a cage that night, its yellowed linoleum floor reflecting the dim glow of a single bulb. The air was thick with the scent of Helen's knitting wool and the faint tang of George's pipe smoke, but the weight of their words pressed heaviest on me. David's casual dismissal of my hard-earned fabric rations, Helen's sharp clucks about my clumsy hands, George's sanctimonious talk of community duty, it all swirled in my mind as I stood over a pile of green beans, snapping them one by one. Each snap echoed my growing anger, a rhythm that kept time with the ticking clock. Noah's small voice asking to give our fabric to Sarah lingered like a bruise. I was Emily Thompson, senior engineer at the Willow Creek steel mill. Yet to my family, I was nothing more than a servant who dared to say no. As I worked, exhaustion pulled at me. The mill had been relentless that week, with a jammed conveyor belt that I'd stayed late to fix my hands raw from wrenching bolts under the heat of the furnaces. The overtime had earned me those precious labor points, $3 a bundle of cotton, a yard of blue fabric meant for Noah's winter jacket, Helen and George's knee pads, and David's backrest. But David's decision to hand his share to Sarah Miller, the widow next door, had turned my sacrifice into a mockery. With her auburn hair and delicate stitches, Sarah was the town's darling, her quilts winning ribbons while my contributions went unseen. I wanted to scream to demand why my labor, my love was never enough, but the words caught in my throat. That night, as I collapsed into bed, the world blurred into darkness, and a vision, or perhaps a dream, seized me. It wasn't just sleep, it was like time unraveled, showing me a life I'd lived before a warning etched in pain. In this other life, I'd given everything to my family, pouring my strength into the mill and our home. But when a fever took hold of me, burning through my body, until I could barely stand, David's family turned cold. Helen and George sat by the hearth, their faces hard, as they urged David to divorce me. "She's a burden now," Helen said, her voice sharp as a blade. "You've got a whole life ahead of you." Noah, my sweet boy, stood beside them, his eyes clouded with their influence. "Mom, you wasted Dad's life," he said, his small hand forcing mine onto divorce papers. The ink smeared under my trembling fingers, pain shooting from my arm to my heart as he added, "Forget her, let's move on." In that vision, I saw myself cast out my belongings, scattered on the lawn, the neighbors' whispers cutting deeper than the cold. David stood beside Sarah, her children clinging to him while I wandered alone. My body frail, my spirit broken. The mill, once my pride, became a distant memory as I faded into nothing. But as the vision dissolved, a clarity washed over me, a second chance, a rebirth. This wasn't just a dream. It was a warning, a glimpse of what awaited if I let others define my worth. I woke with a start, my heart pounding the darkness of our bedroom, now a canvas for resolve. I wouldn't let that future claim me. I'd rewrite my fate starting now. As dawn broke over Willow Creek's smokestacks the next morning, I stood at the kitchen window, watching the mill's smoke curl into the sky. The town was waking its rhythm tied to the factory's whistle, its people bound by the ration system that governed our lives. Labor points were our currency earned through sweat and traded for survival food tickets, fabric hope. I'd spent years trading mine for my family's comfort, but no more. The vision had shown me the cost of my silence, and I refused to pay it again. Noah shuffled in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his brown curls a mirror of David's. "Mom, are you mad?" he asked, his voice small. I knelt beside him, my heart aching at his confusion. "I'm not mad at you, Noah," I said softly, "but I've been giving too much, and it's time I stand up for myself. I love you, but I need to love me too." He frowned, not understanding, but I saw a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. I hoped one day he'd know why I had to fight. David entered his work boots heavy on the floor. "You're up early," he said, eyeing me warily. Still upset about the fabric, I met his gaze, my voice steady. "It's not just the fabric, David. It's everything. I'm done being invisible." His brow furrowed, but I didn't wait for a response. The vision had lit a fire in me, and I wouldn't let it flicker out. Willow Creek might expect me to bend, give, and fade, but I was ready to break free. That morning, as I headed to the mill, my steps were lighter, my purpose clear. I was Emily Thompson, and I was reborn. The Willow Creek steel mill loomed over the town like a sleeping giant, its smokestacks puffing gray clouds into the July sky. Inside, the air smelled of molten steel and oil, the clang of machinery a constant pulse. As a senior engineer, I spent my days coaxing life from aging presses and rollers, my hands steady despite the heat and noise. But that morning, as I tightened a bolt on a conveyor belt, my mind wasn't on the steel, it was on the vision that had shaken me awake, the memory of a life where my sacrifices led to betrayal. Once, a beacon of love, David's face now fueled a growing resentment. I'd built our life in Willow Creek for 10 years, leaving my Dayton roots to marry a man whose confidence had captivated me. But that confidence had morphed into disdain. His admiration was reserved for Sarah Miller, not me. Sarah lived next door, her clapboard house a mirror of ours, but her life seemed to shine brighter. At 30, she was a widow with 2 children. Her auburn hair and delicate manner earned her the town's sympathy. Her quilts stitched from scraps hung proudly at the county fair, while my engineering skills vital to the mill's output went unnoticed at home. David's words from the night before echoed, "You'd waste the fabric, Emily. Sarah's got the gift." The comparison stung, but it was more than that. It was the years of giving my rations, my overtime, my heart, while David and his parents praised Sarah's elegance, her poise. I'd moved to Willow Creek for love, but now I saw how my suffering had built their comfort, not mine. At the mill's lunchroom, I sat alone picking at a sandwich, the chatter of workers swirling around me. The ration system governed our lives. Labor points traded for food tickets, cotton fabric, and I'd poured mine into our family. Last winter, I'd skipped meals to save tickets for Noah's birthday cake. I'd worked night shifts to earn extra points for Helen's arthritis medicine, George's tobacco, and David's new boots. Yet when I refused to give my fabric to Sarah, I was the selfish one. The injustice burned a fire stoked by the vision of my past life where my devotion ended in divorce and exile. I couldn't unsee it, David standing beside Sarah, her children in new clothes while I was cast out. My body failing, my son turning away. I pushed my plate aside and walked to the mill's courtyard, where workers gathered under the shade of an oak tree. David was laughing with the other drivers, his charm lighting up the group. He'd always had that gift making people feel seen, important. It was why I'd fallen for him and left my family to build a life here. 10 years ago, he'd been a young driver respected by the mill's engineers for his skill with a truck. Now at 35, his presence was stronger, his laugh deeper, his confidence magnetic. But as I watched him, I saw something else, Sarah standing nearby, her smile bright as she handed him a thermos of coffee. He took it, his hand lingering on hers, and my heart twisted. It wasn't just admiration I felt anymore, it was resentment, sharp and raw, for the years I'd wasted trying to be enough. Back home that evening, the tension was palpable. Helen sat knitting her needles, clicking like a metronome. George read the paper, his pipe smoke curling upward. Noah played with a wooden truck, oblivious to the storm brewing. David walked in his work jacket slung over his shoulder. "Good day at the mill?" he asked, his tone light, as if last night's argument hadn't happened. I didn't answer. Instead, I set down the green beans I was preparing and faced him. "Why is it always Sarah?" I asked, my voice low but firm. "Every time I give something up, my rations, my time, you compare me to her. Why am I never enough?" He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Emily, don't start this again. Sarah's alone raising 2 kids. She needs help. You've got us a family. What's so hard about sharing? I snapped, my voice rising. "I've shared everything, my labor points, sleep, and dreams. I worked overtime for that fabric, David, Noah, your parents, and you want to give it to her because I'm not as poised or perfect?" Helen looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Emily, don't raise your voice. It's not ladylike. Sarah's got a talent you don't. Be grateful for what you have." Grateful. The word landed like a stone. I'd been thankful for David's love, Noah's laughter, and the mill's steady work. But gratitude had become a chain binding me to a life where my worth was measured against Sarah's. The vision flashed again, Noah's hand on the divorce papers, Helen's cold stare, David's absence. I wouldn't let that future come true. "I'm done being grateful for scraps," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm a senior engineer, David. I keep the mill running. I deserve more than your pity or your comparisons." He stared at me, surprise flickering in his eyes. Noah looked up, his truck forgotten, and I saw a question in his gaze, a flicker of the boy who still needed me. I wanted to pull him close, to promise him I'd fight for us both, but first I had to fight for myself. That night, as I lay in bed, the mill's distant hum, a lullaby, I made a vow. I'd stop living for their approval. I'd reclaim my life, my skills, my future. The vision had shown me what I could lose, but also what I could become. Tomorrow I'd start breaking free. The Willow Creek steel mill buzzed with life, its furnaces roaring like dragons in the early morning light of late July 1955. The air was thick with the scent of molten steel and coal dust, and the clatter of machinery echoed through the cavernous halls. As a senior engineer, I spent my days coaxing precision from aging presses, my hands steady despite the heat that made my coveralls cling to my skin. But today my mind wasn't on the rollers or the gauges. It was on the vision that had shaken me awake 2 nights ago, a haunting glimpse of a life where my sacrifices led to betrayal. David's dismissive words, Helen and George's sanctimonious lectures, and Noah's innocent plea to give our fabric to Sarah fueled a fire in me that refused to die. I was Emily Thompson, and I was done being invisible. The mill was the heart of Willow Creek, Ohio, a town of tidy bungalows and gossip-filled diners, where every worker's labor points were currency for survival. $3 a bundle of cotton, a yard of fabric were my rewards for a week of overtime, 16-hour shifts that left my hands blistered and my eyes heavy. I'd planned to sew a jacket for Noah, knee pads for Helen and George, and a backrest for David. But David's decision to give his share to Sarah Miller, the widow next door, had turned my labor into a mockery. His comparison of my clumsy hands to Sarah's delicate stitches still stung, a reminder of how little he valued me. The vision of my past life divorce papers, Noah's betrayal, my body failing, had been a warning. I wouldn't let that future claim me. Today, I'd take the first step to rewrite my fate. I marched across the mill's courtyard, past workers sipping coffee under the shade of an oak tree, their laughter mingling with the hum of machinery. The director's office was a small brick building near the main gate, its windows fogged with dust. Mr. Harris, a wiry man with a penchant for order, was finishing paperwork when I knocked. "Emily, what brings you here?" he asked, peering over his glasses. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Mr. Harris, I've been thinking about the Skillshare program. You wanted me to mentor Sarah Miller, but I have a better idea. Why not hold a public seminar? I'm the only senior engineer here. I can teach everyone, mechanics, welders, even the new hires, how to improve efficiency. It'll benefit the whole mill, not just one person." His eyes lit up, a rare smile breaking through his stern demeanor. "That's brilliant, Emily. We've got an evaluation next week and the state inspectors are coming. You'll lead a presentation for the engineering department. Show them what Willow Creek's made of." I nodded, but I wasn't done. The vision had shown me a life of sacrifice and loss, and I refused to repeat it. "One more thing," I said, clenching my fists to steady myself. "I want to apply for the technical support position in the Northwest. They're building new plants there, and I'm the best fit for the job." Mr. Harris leaned back, his brow furrowing. "The Northwest, Emily, that's a big move. Helen's health isn't excellent, George needs to be looked after, and Noah has just started school. David's always on the road driving. Are you sure you want to leave them?" The mention of my family sent a pang through me, but I thought of Noah's confused eyes, Helen's sharp tongue, and David's indifference. The Northwest was more than a job. It was a chance to reclaim my life, to use my skills for something greater than appeasing others. In Willow Creek, the ration system kept us tethered to the mill, our labor points traded for fabric, food tickets, and survival. But out west, the industrial boom promised opportunity where my engineering degree could shine. I met Mr. Harris's gaze, my voice firm. "Serving the nation's progress comes first. The Northwest needs skilled engineers to build those plants. Tell me who in this mill has my qualifications, who's better suited." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "You're right. You're our best. But it's not a short assignment. You could be gone for years." "Will David and your family agree?" I said. "That's not your concern." Mr. Harris, and my tone was unwavering. "This country trained me, and I'll serve it. Just arrange it." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, Emily. I'll put your name forward. Prepare for the seminar, and we'll finalize the transfer after the evaluation." As I left his office, the mill's whistle blew, signaling the end of the morning shift. Workers streamed out, their faces weary but proud, their labor points tallied for another day's survival. I felt a surge of triumph, a spark of the woman I could become. The vision had shown me what I stood to lose, but also what I could gain. I wasn't just defying David or his parents, I was defying the expectations of Willow Creek, a town that saw women like me as wives and mothers first, engineers second. As I walked back to the engineering floor, my steps were lighter, my purpose clear. I was taking control, and no one would stop me. The sun dipped low over Willow Creek, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink as I walked home from the mill. The streets were lined with bungalows, their porches alive with the chatter of neighbors and the laughter of children playing tag. In 1955, Willow Creek was a town bound by the rhythm of the steel mill, its workers tethered to a ration system that turned labor into fabric food tickets and fleeting moments of comfort. For years, I'd poured my labor points into our family, skipping meals to save for Noah's birthday cake, working night shifts to afford Helen's medicine, George's tobacco, and David's boots. But the vision of my past life where my sacrifices ended in betrayal had lit a fire in me. I was Emily Thompson's senior engineer, and I was done being the family's servant. Our bungalow was a modest affair, its white paint peeling under the weight of Ohio's winters. Inside, the kitchen smelled of boiled cabbage and Helen's lavender soap. Noah sat at the table coloring a picture of a truck while Helen knitted, and George read the paper. David was late, likely chatting with Sarah Miller next door, his thermos of coffee a gift from her nimble hands. The blue fabric I'd earned still sat on the counter, a silent battleground. I'd refused to give it to Sarah, and the tension in the house had thickened like the humid air before a storm. As I started dinner chopping carrots with a rhythm that matched my racing thoughts, Helen looked up from her knitting. "Emily, you're being stubborn about that fabric. Sarah could make something beautiful for her kids. You're no seamstress." I gripped the knife tighter, my voice low. "I earned that fabric, Helen. It's for Noah's jacket, your knee pads, and David's backrest. Why is it always me who has to give?" George lowered his paper, his pipe puffing smoke. "It's about community, Emily. Sarah's got no husband. You've got David. Be reasonable." Reasonable. The word grated, a reminder of how they'd dismissed my overtime, blistered hands, and sleepless nights at the mill. The vision flashed: divorce papers, Noah's cold words, David's absence, and I felt the fire in me flare. I set the knife down, my hands trembling. "I'm done being reasonable," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "You all have hands. If you're hungry, cook for yourselves." The room fell silent, the only sound Noah's crayon scratching the paper. Helen's needles froze, George's pipe dangled, and Noah looked up, his brown eyes wide. David walked in at that moment, his work jacket slung over his shoulder, his face darkening as he caught the tail end of my words. "What's this, Emily? You're refusing to cook now, the kids are hungry, and you're making a scene." "Kids," I snapped, turning to face him. "Noah's my son, not Sarah's. And if her kids are hungry, why aren't you at her house cooking for them? You're so quick to give her my fabric, my labor. What about me, David?" He flinched, but his voice hardened. "Don't start, Emily. Sarah's alone. You're not. Stop acting like you're the victim." The accusation hit like a punch, but I stood my ground. The vision's warning echoing. "I'm not the victim," I said, my voice steady. "I'm the one keeping this family fed, clothed, alive. And I'm done doing it alone." Noah dropped his crayon, his small voice breaking the tension. "Mom, why are you fighting? I want dinner." My heart ached at his confusion, but I knelt beside him, softening my tone. "Noah, I love you, but can't keep giving everything while no one sees me. You'll understand one day." He nodded slowly, his eyes searching mine, and I hoped the seed of understanding would take root. Sarah started lingering at our house the next day, her children trailing behind her. She offered to cook, claiming gratitude for our help, but her efforts were a disaster. Burned stew, a clogged sink, broken plates. "I've never had to manage a whole house," she said, her voice frail as Helen clucked sympathetically. David hovered nearby, praising her effort as if it were a masterpiece, while my perfectly cooked meals had never earned a word of thanks. Sarah's incompetence only highlighted my years of unseen labor, and I felt a grim satisfaction watching their perfect image crack. I stopped all household chores, cooking, cleaning, sewing, leaving the bungalow in chaos. Helen's complaints grew sharper. George muttered about laziness, and Noah whined for his favorite pancakes. David tried to mediate, his charm faltering. "Emily, cook tonight. We'll figure this out." "No," I said, folding my arms. "You figure it out. I've been your maid for years. If you want dinner, make it yourself." The standoff continued for days, the house a battleground of dirty dishes and unwashed laundry. Sarah's visits became more frequent, her sweet smiles masking her reliance on David's attention. But her failures, scorched pots, shattered glassware, exposed her as a fraud, unable to match the work I'd done for years. Helen and George, once her champions, began to grumble, their patience thinning. Noah, caught in the middle, clung to me at night, whispering, "Mom, are you leaving us?" I held him close, my voice soft but firm. "I'm not leaving you, Noah. But I need to be more than just your mom. I need to be me." His slight nod was enough for now, a flicker of hope he'd understand. As I walked to the mill each morning, the vision's warning fueled my resolve. I defied their expectations, and the seminar loomed a chance to prove my worth beyond the kitchen. The Northwest transfer was my escape, a new life where my skills, not my sacrifices, would define me. The chains of domestic duty were breaking, and I was ready to step into the light. The August sun beat down on Willow Creek, Ohio in 1955, turning the air thick with heat and the faint metallic tang of the steel mill. The town pulsed with the rhythm of the factory, its smokestacks looming over rows of bungalows where families traded labor points for survival. As a senior engineer, I'd spent years pouring my sweat into the Willow Creek steel mill, earning dollars, cotton, and fabric to keep my family fed and clothed. But the vision that had gripped me weeks ago, a haunting glimpse of a past life where my sacrifices ended in betrayal, had changed everything. David's dismissal of my labor, Helen and George's sanctimonious demands, and even Noah's innocent plea to give our fabric to Sarah Miller had lit a fire in me. I was Emily Thompson, and I was done being the family's servant fading into the background of this small industrial town. Our bungalow was a battleground, now the tension as palpable as the humidity that clung to the walls. I'd stopped cooking, cleaning, and sewing, refusing to play the dutiful wife and mother role while my family praised Sarah, the widowed neighbor, with her delicate hands and county fair quilts. Once my domain, the kitchen was a mess of unwashed dishes and half-chopped vegetables, a silent protest against years of unseen labor. Helen's knitting needles clicked furiously, her lips pursed as she muttered about my laziness. George, puffing his pipe, grumbled about the lack of dinner. David, home from his latest truck route, scowled at the chaos, his charm faltering under the weight of my defiance. But it was Noah, my 8-year-old son, who tugged at my heart. His brown eyes, so like David's, clouded with confusion. That evening, as I sat on the porch steps, the mill's distant hum, a familiar lullaby, Noah shuffled out, clutching his wooden truck. The street was alive with neighbors chatting their voices, carrying tales of ration tickets and mill gossip. In Willow Creek, every labor point was hard-won, traded for fabric or food tickets that meant survival through Ohio's brutal winters. I'd given up countless points for Noah's birthday cakes, Helen's arthritis medicine, and David's boots, but my refusal to hand over my fabric to Sarah had branded me selfish. The vision of my past life divorce papers, Noah's cold words my body cast out, still haunted me, a warning I couldn't ignore. "Mom, why don't you make dinner anymore?" Noah asked, his voice small as he sat beside me, his truck rolling aimlessly in his hands. "Grandma says you're being mean. Sarah made us cookies today." "She's nice." The words stung, but I saw the innocence in his eyes, the way Helen and George's complaints had shaped his view. Sarah's cookies. Her gentle smiles had won him over, while my years of sacrifice night shifts, skipped meals were invisible to him. I knelt before him, brushing a curl from his forehead. "Noah, I love you more than anything," I said softly, my voice steady, despite the ache in my chest. "But I've been giving everything to this family, my time, my work, my heart, and no one sees it. I need to stand up for myself, to be more than just Mom. I want you to be proud of me, not just for cooking, but for who I am." He frowned, his small brow furrowing. "But Sarah's kids don't have a dad. Don't we have to help them?" I sighed, the vision's pain flashing through me. "Helping is good, Noah, but it shouldn't mean giving up what we need. I worked hard for that fabric for your jacket, Grandma and Grandpa and Dad. They can't just take it because Sarah's nicer to them." I paused, searching his eyes. "One day you'll understand why I'm fighting. I want you to know you can fight for yourself, too." He nodded slowly, his truck still in his hands, and I hoped my words had planted a seed. Helen's voice carried through the screen door, complaining about the dirty laundry. David stormed in his boots, heavy on the linoleum. He said, "Emily, this has gone far enough," his voice sharp. "Sarah's trying to help, and you're letting the house fall apart." "What kind of wife does that?" I stood, my resolve hardening. "The kind who's tired of being your maid," I said, meeting his gaze. "Sarah's here every day, burning stew and breaking plates. If she's so helpful, let her run the house." I'm done. Sarah had indeed taken to lingering at our bungalow, her children trailing behind their laughter, mingling with Noah's. She'd offered to cook, claiming gratitude for David's support, but her efforts were a disaster: scorched pots, a clogged sink, shattered glassware. "I'm not used to managing a whole house," she said, her voice frail as Helen clucked sympathetically. David praised her attempts, his eyes soft, while my years of perfect meals had never earned a word of thanks. Her incompetence only highlighted my labor, and I felt a grim satisfaction watching their reliance on her crumble. Noah tugged my sleeve, his voice hesitant. "Mom, are you mad at me?" I hugged him tightly, my heart aching. "Never at you, Noah. I'm fighting for us, for a better life. You'll see." His small arms wrapped around me, and I clung to the hope that he'd one day understand. As I prepared for the Mills seminar studying blueprints under a dim lamp, I felt the vision's warning push me forward. The Northwest transfer loomed a chance to escape Willow Creek's expectations and build a life where my skills, not my sacrifices, defined me. The domestic chains were breaking, and I was ready to step into my own power. The Willow Creek diner was a haven of clinking plates and murmured gossip, its red vinyl booths filled with mill workers and townsfolk trading stories over coffee and pie. It was early August 1955, and the town's pulse beat in time with the steel mill where labor points were the currency of survival. As a senior engineer, I'd earned a $20 bonus for my seminar presentation, a rare triumph that had the state inspectors praising Willow Creek's efficiency. I'd used the money to treat myself to a meal at the diner, a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, a small act of defiance against the years I'd skipped meals to save ration tickets for my family. The vision of my past life divorce papers, Noah's betrayal, David's absence still burned in my mind, a warning that fueled my resolve to reclaim my life. I sat alone at a corner booth, savoring the rare luxury of a meal I hadn't cooked, when the diner door swung open. David stormed in, followed by Helen, George, and Noah, their faces mixed with anger and desperation. Helen's voice cut through the hum of conversation. "Look at her stuffing her face while Noah starves," she wailed, pointing at my plate. "What kind of mother eats fancy food alone?" The diner fell silent, heads turning, eyes sharp with curiosity. In Willow Creek, gossip was as vital as labor points, and I could feel the weight of judgment settling over me. But the vision's fire burned brighter than their accusations. I set down my fork, my voice calm but firm. "Starves Noah, come here." I gently pulled him forward, lifting his shirt to reveal his thin frame, his ribs faintly visible. "This is what my labor buys years of overtime, skipped meals, night shifts. And where's the money David earns driving trucks, Captain Rogers? You're here. Tell us." Captain Rogers, head of the mill's transport team, sat at the counter. His coffee cup paused midair. He cleared his throat, caught off guard. "Well, Emily, wages are paid on time. David's had no complaints." I nodded, my eyes locked on David's paling face. "And how much for out-of-town drives last month?" David had 11 days on the road. "That's a decent sum." The captain hesitated, then answered, $8 a day. 11 days make $88. Gasps rippled through the diner, forks clinking against plates. $88 could buy a month's worth of groceries, a new coat, and a radio. I turned to the crowd, my voice rising. $88, and I haven't seen a cent. My son's thin as a rail, and David's spending on what, Sarah Miller's kids? A nurse from the Mills clinic spoke up, her voice clear. "I saw David paying for Sarah's son's hospital bills last month. Bought him porridge, too." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, eyes shifting to David. His face flushed red, then drained to white, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Helen, still standing, pointed at me, her voice shrill. "You're heartless, Emily. Eating here while we struggle," I laughed. Cold and sharp. "Struggle. I've worked myself to the bone for this family, night shifts, overtime, every labor point I've got. And David, he's giving our money to Sarah while Noah goes without. Tell me, David, where's that $88? He grabbed my arm, his voice low and urgent. "Emily, stop. Family matters, stay private. Let's go home." I shook him off, my voice carrying. "Private? I'd never know how much you make if I hadn't said this here, or how much you spend on Sarah's son. 11 days on the road and you were barely home." "Where's the money, David?" a woman in the crowd snorted. "Sounds like he's playing house with the widow." Laughter followed, sharp and cutting. David stammered, "I saved it for Noah and the family. I was handling business." "Then show me the bank book," I said, holding my hand. "If it's all there, fine. If not, what then?" He froze, his eyes darting away. The crowd's whispers turned to open criticism, some calling him ungrateful, others shaking their heads at Helen's theatrics. Noah, clinging to my side, looked up, his voice trembling. "Dad, why didn't you buy me candy like you did for Tommy?" The question hung in the air, a child's innocence cutting deeper than any accusation. David's face was crumpled, and guilt was written on every line. I knelt beside Noah, my heart aching. "It's okay, Noah," I whispered. "I'm fighting for us, for what's right." He nodded, his eyes wet, and I saw a flicker of understanding in his gaze. I stood facing the crowd. You all see it. My labor keeps this family afloat, but David's money goes to Sarah. I'm done being the fool. The diner erupted in murmurs, some nodding in support, others glaring at David. Helen sank into a booth, her wails fading, while George looked away, his pipe forgotten. David tried to speak, but I turned and walked out. Noah's hand in mine, the vision's warning echoing, I wouldn't let them break me again. Back at the mill, I buried myself in seminar preparations, the Northwest transfer looming as my escape. The diner's reckoning had shifted, something in Willow Creek gossip now turned against David and Sarah. And I felt the town's eyes on me, not with judgment, but with respect. I was Emily Thompson, and I was rewriting my fate, one defiant step at a time. The late August heat draped Willow Creek, Ohio, like a heavy quilt, the air thick with the scent of molten steel from the mill and the faint sweetness of honeysuckle from neighborhood gardens. In 1955, this small industrial town thrived on the rhythm of the Willow Creek steel mill, where labor points were traded for dollars, cotton, and fabric lifelines in a ration-based economy. As a senior engineer, Emily Thompson, had poured years of sweat into keeping the mill's machinery humming, earning benefits to clothe my son Noah and support my husband David and his parents Helen and George. But the vision that had gripped me weeks ago, a haunting glimpse of a past life where my sacrifices ended in betrayal, had set me on a new path. The diner confrontation where I'd exposed David's secret spending on Sarah Miller, the widowed neighbor, had shifted the town's gossip in my favor. Yet the fire of my resolve, stoked by that vision, burned brighter than ever. The mill was abuzz with preparations for the state evaluation, and my public seminar was a success that earned me a $20 bonus and a nod for the Northwest technical support position. Willow Creek's streets, lined with bungalows and picket fences, hummed with whispers about David's $88 from 11 days of truck routes money I'd never seen spent on Sarah's son instead of Noah. The vision's warning divorce papers, Noah's cold words, my exile pushed me to keep fighting, not just for myself, but for the life I deserved. I'd stopped all chores at home, leaving the bungalow in chaos. Sarah's attempts to take over burned stew, broken plates, had exposed her incompetence, and Helen and George's complaints grew quieter, their reliance on her faltering. Noah, caught in the middle, clung to me at night, his confusion a weight on my heart. As I reviewed blueprints for the seminar that morning, a commotion erupted at the mill. Workers gathered near the main building, their voices a mix of shock and curiosity. I pushed through the crowd, my heart sinking as I saw Sarah Miller standing on the roof's edge, dressed in a white blouse, her auburn hair loose in the breeze. Tears streamed down her face, her voice trembling as she called out, "David, I can't go on like this. You didn't mean for things to happen, but we crossed a line. If you leave my son and I won't survive." The crowd gasped, eyes darting to David, who stood below his face, pale with panic. "Sarah, please come down," he shouted, his voice breaking. "It was my fault. I'll stay, I promise. I'll take responsibility." My stomach twisted. The vision's pain flashing, David standing beside Sarah, my life discarded. Noah beside me clutched my hand, his eyes wide. "Mom, is she gonna jump?" he whispered. I squeezed his hand, my voice low. "She's trying to keep your dad, Noah. But I'm not letting her take our future." His nod was slight, but I saw a flicker of trust in his eyes, a seed of understanding growing. Mrs. Carter, a sharp-tongued neighbor, cracked a sunflower seed, her voice cutting through the tension. "Quite the show, Sarah. Pledging to another woman's husband while Emily's right here. Impressive." The crowd murmured, some laughing, others shaking their heads. Sarah's eyes flickered with desperation, her frail act wavering under the town's scrutiny. "David, if you can't leave her, I'd rather die than be a burden," she cried, stepping closer to the edge. Gasps rose as she jumped, but the ground below was stacked with hay bales from a recent delivery. She landed hard, unconscious but alive, the crowd erupting in chaos. David bolted forward, shouting her name while an ambulance stopped. He climbed beside her, not sparing me a glance, his choice clear as day. I stood frozen, Noah's hand in mine, the vision's warning now a reality. Mrs. Carter clapped my shoulder, her voice firm. "Let him go, Emily. He's made his bed. You've got bigger things ahead." The crowd's eyes turned to me, not with judgment but respect. I knelt beside Noah, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "Noah, your dad's choosing someone else, but I'm choosing us. You and me, we're going to be okay." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and I held him close, the mill's whistle a distant echo of my resolve. Helen and George were silent at the bungalow, their usual complaints replaced by uneasy glances. David didn't return that night, likely at the hospital with Sarah. The town's gossip turned vicious stories of Sarah's flirtations with married men spreading like wildfire. I buried myself in seminar notes, the Northwest transfer, my beacon of freedom. The vision had shown me a life of loss, but it also showed me my strength. Sarah's stunt had backfired, exposing her desperation, and I was ready to step into the light, leaving David's betrayal behind. The Willow Creek steel mill stood tall against the September sky, its smokestacks a constant reminder of the labor that defined our town. In 1955, Willow Creek, Ohio, was a place where every dollar, every yard of fabric was earned through sweat and traded through a ration system that kept families afloat. As a senior engineer, I'd spent years keeping the mill's machinery alive, my labor points feeding my son Noah and supporting my husband David and his parents Helen and George. But the vision of my past life, where my sacrifices led to divorce and exile, had set me on a path of defiance. The diner confrontation had exposed David's secret spending on Sarah Miller, and her rooftop stunt at the mill had cemented his choice to prioritize her over me. I was Emily Thompson, and I was done being the fool. The bungalow was quieter now, and the chaos of unwashed dishes and laundry was a testament to my refusal to play servant. Helen and George, once quick to criticize, avoided my gaze, their reliance on Sarah's failed chores, leaving them humbled. Noah, my 8-year-old son, was my anchor, and his confusion was a constant ache. After Sarah's jump, he'd clung to me, asking Mom, why does Dad care more about her? I'd held him close, promising we'd build a new life, but the hurt in his eyes lingered. The visions warning Noah forcing my hand on divorce papers haunted me, but I was determined to change that future, to show him a mother who fought for her worth. David returned from the hospital a week later, his face haggard, his charm replaced by desperation. He found me in the kitchen sorting through my mill blueprints. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, his voice weary. "I was wrong. I installed a street light on the mill road so you don't have to walk in the dark. I'm done with Sarah. Let's start over." I scoffed, the vision's pain sharp in my chest. Start over. You spent our money on her son, walked her to the mill, cared for her kids, never mine. I've taken that dark road alone for years, David. Did you ever think of me? He flinched, his eyes dropping. Sarah's alone, Emily. Her husband was on my transport team. I just wanted to help. Help, my voice was cold, steady. You bought her son candy while Noah went without. You gave her my fabric while I worked overtime. Is a man only unfaithful if he's caught in bed? Ask yourself. David, have you ever cared for Noah or me like you do for her? He sighed, his shoulders slumping. Your life's better now than in Dayton. What more do you want? I laughed, bitter and sharp. Better, I've worked myself to death for this family, and you think I should be grateful while you buy chocolate for her kids. I want a divorce, David. The word hung between us, heavy as the mill's iron. While playing in the next room, Noah paused, his wooden truck still. David's face darkened, but I handed him the divorce papers I'd prepared before he could speak. He tore them apart, his voice rising. There's nothing between me and Sarah. Why do you keep pushing this? You chose her on that roof, I said, my voice eerily calm. You promised to stay with her right in front of me. I'm done, David. Sign the papers. Helen stormed in, her face flushed. Emily, stop this nonsense. We'll go with you to the Northwest. It's David's hometown. We'll stay together as a family. I shook my head, the vision's warning clear. No, Helen. You're his responsibility, not mine. I'm not taking Noah or you. I'm going alone. Noah ran to me, tears streaming. Mom, don't leave me. My heart broke, but I knelt holding his face. Noah, I love you, but can't keep living for everyone else. You'll always be my son, but I need to be free. You'll understand one day. David's voice cracked. Emily, take Noah and my parents. I'll stay here, help Sarah recover, then join you. You can trust me. I laughed, cold and final. Trust you? I couldn't control your money when I was here. Why would I trust you across the country? We're done. I moved into the mill's dormitory that night, packing only my clothes and blueprints. The quiet of the small room was a balm, letting me focus on the Northwest transfer. The town's gossip, led by Mrs. Carter, turned against David and Sarah, their whispers a shield as I prepared to leave. The mill announced my transfer, and I handed David new divorce papers. This time he signed, his eyes hollow. You'll manage, Emily, he said. Sarah's not strong like you. Then let her lean on you, I said, crossing my arms. You, your parents. Noah, they're yours now. I'm done carrying you all. I walked away, the mill's whistle a farewell. The vision had shown me a life of loss, but it had also shown me my strength. I boarded a train to the northwest with my appointment letter, leaving Willow Creek's chains behind. I was Emily Thompson, and I was free. The train's whistle pierced the crisp September air as it pulled away from Willow Creek, Ohio in 1955, carrying me toward the northwest. The town's smokestacks faded into the distance, their gray plumes a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. Willow Creek had been my world for a decade, a small industrial town where the steel mill's rhythm dictated our days, and labor points were traded for dollars, cotton, and fabric in a ration-based economy. As Emily Thompson, senior engineer, I'd poured my sweat into keeping the mill's machinery alive, sacrificing sleep and meals to provide for my son Noah, my husband David, and his parents Helen and George. But the vision that had haunted me, a past life of betrayal, divorce papers, and exile, had pushed me to break free. The diner confrontation, exposing David's secret spending on Sarah Miller and her desperate rooftop stunt, had solidified my resolve. I divorced David, leaving him Noah and his parents behind, and now I was bound for a new life in the Northwest's industrial boom. The Northwest was a land of promise, its factories springing up like wildflowers after rain, fueled by America's post-war hunger for steel and innovation. I arrived in Spokane, Washington, where the air was sharp with pine and the hum of new machinery. As a technical support engineer, I dove into work calibrating presses and optimizing production lines in a sprawling plant that dwarfed Willow Creek's mill. The vision's warning lingered, but it was no longer a weight, but a spark driving me to prove my worth. I pored over blueprints late into the night, my dormitory room a sanctuary of focus, free from the chaos of unwashed dishes and Helen's complaints. For the first time, my skills defined me, not my role as wife or mother. Days turned to months, then years, as I climbed the ranks from technical support to engineering consultant. The Northwest's factories were a canvas for innovation, and I painted boldly, redesigning conveyor systems, streamlining workflows, cutting costs, without sacrificing quality. My colleagues respected me, and their nods of approval starkly contrasted with David's dismissals. In 1960, I met James Carter, a fellow engineer with a quiet intensity and a passion for progress. We bonded over late-night discussions about steel alloys and automation, our shared vision forging a partnership that grew into love. We married in a simple ceremony, our vows spoken under a Spokane sky, the mill's hum a distant hymn. James and I had no children, but our work became our legacy, each new production line a testament to our shared purpose. The Northwest's economy flourished under our efforts, our innovations boosting output and creating jobs. By the 1970s, our plants produced steel that rivaled the world's best, exported to cities from Seattle to Tokyo. I thought of Noah often, his confused eyes haunting me, but the vision had shown me the cost of staying. I'd sent money for his care, but David's sparse and curt letters offered little news. The pain of leaving Noah was a scar, but I held on to the hope that he'd one day understand my choice, that he'd see a mother who fought for her worth. Back in Willow Creek, life unraveled for those I'd left behind. David married Sarah soon after my departure, but their union was a house of cards. Accustomed to customdra, neglected her mill and her wages were reduced. David's reputation, tarnished by gossip about his spending on Sarah, cost him out-of-town routes, slashing his income. With 3 children, Sarah's 2, and Noah, their finances crumbled. Unable to bear hardship, Sarah sought other men, eventually fleeing with an equipment buyer after swindling the mill on a deal. The director, enraged, revoked their housing, forcing David, Helen, George, and the children to a cramped rental near the industrial district. Helen and George, frail with age, moved back to their hometown, their health failing in isolation. Noah, neglected by Sarah's indifference, dropped out of school, chasing failed business ventures that left him in debt. When loan sharks came, he vanished, his fate unknown. I learned this through letters from Mrs. Carter, the sharp-tongued neighbor who'd backed me at the mill. Her words were blunt. David and Sarah got what they deserved. You, Emily, built a life worth living. The vision had been right, my sacrifices would have led to ruin. By choosing myself, I'd built a legacy not just for me, but for the Northwest's workers and communities. James and I slowed down in the 1980s, stepping back from frontline work to consult our expertise shaping the region's industrial future. The pain of Noah's loss lingered, but I carried it with pride, knowing I'd rewritten my fate. The Willow Creek steel mill was unrecognizable when I returned in 1985. Its once dusty buildings are now sleek with modern steel and glass, a testament to the industrial revival sweeping Ohio. At 55, I was a senior consultant, invited back with my husband James to evaluate the mill's aging equipment for liquidation. Willow Creek had transformed in my absence, its bungalows replaced by brick homes, its streets bustling with new shops and families. The ration system of 1955 was a distant memory, replaced by a thriving economy, but the mill's hum still echoed a reminder of the labor that had shaped my life. The vision that had driven me a past life of betrayal and loss had faded to a quiet certainty, its warning fulfilled by the life I'd built in the Northwest. I was Emily Thompson, no longer the overlooked wife, but a woman whose skills had reshaped an industry. James drove us to the mill, our two junior colleagues scribbling notes as we passed fields once littered with coal dust. The town's transformation mirrored my own, from a woman bound by sacrifice to one defined by purpose. James and I had turned factories into powerhouses in Spokane, our innovations boosting the Northwest's economy. The pain of leaving Noah lingered, a scar softened by time, but I'd made peace with my choice. The vision had shown me a life of ruin, divorce papers. Noah's cold words, my body broken, and I defied it, building a legacy instead. Mrs. Carter, now gray-haired but still sharp, had kept me updated on Willow Creek's gossip, her letters detailing David and Sarah's downfall. Helen and George had passed away in their hometown, isolated and frail. Noah, caught in Sarah's neglect, had dropped out, fallen into debt, and vanished. David's fate was murkier, a shadow in her tales. As we reached the mill, a frail figure in a faded work uniform swept the entrance gate, his shoulders stooped, his hair gray. My breath caught David. Once bright with charm, his eyes were murky with age and regret. He froze when he saw me, his broom trembling, then quickly unlocked the gate, motioning us inside before hurrying away. I didn't call after him, the vision's pain, a faint echo now. James and I led our colleagues through the mill, my voice steady as I explained the equipment's layout, noting which presses could be salvaged. James said these components can be sold separately, inspecting a rusted conveyor. It'll mean more severance for the workers. I nodded, thinking about the mill's past, my late nights fixing these machines, my labor points traded for Noah's jacket, Helen's medicine, David's boots. The mill had been my battleground, where I'd fought to be seen. It was a relic. Its workers faced layoffs unless we maximized the liquidation. I glanced at David, crouched against a wall, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "The sale will cover overdue wages," I said in his direction, my tone neutral. He didn't respond, but as we walked to the car, I heard muffled sobs faint against the mill's hum. James sighed, glancing in the rearview mirror. Life's been hard for him. He's probably waited years for that money. Maybe, I said, staring out the window at Willow Creek's new skyline. But some hardships are self-inflicted. He chose Sarah and chose to dismiss me. Now he lives with it. That evening, Mrs. Carter hosted a welcome dinner at her home, her dining room filled with former neighbors, their faces lined with age, but warm with pride. "I always said you were destined for better," Emily said, pouring coffee. "Look at you, consultant, dressed like a professional, changing the Northwest. David and Sarah. They fell apart." She recounted their story. Sarah's abandonment, David's lost roots, their financial ruin, Helen and George's deaths in their hometown, and Noah's disappearance after debt collectors trashed his life. The neighbors nodded, their voices soft with sympathy, not for David, but for me. I sipped my coffee, the vision's shadow fading. Choices shape our fate. I said, my voice steady. I chose myself, and it made all the difference. As James and I drove away, Willow Creek blurred into the dusk, its lights a constellation of my past. The mill, David, the pain of leaving Noah, they were behind me, unchangeable. But ahead lay the future. I'd built a life of purpose and pride. I was Emily Thompson, reborn, and I'd never look back.